Okay, today we're making one of my absolute favorite cakes of all time, a classic Smith Island cake. My recipe is made with lots of thin, buttery yellow cake layers stacked together with a rich, silky chocolate fudge frosting. It might look impressive, but it's actually much easier to make than you'd think, and the combination of tender cake and fudgy chocolate frosting is just absolutely incredible. So we're going to start off by making the chocolate fudge frosting first so that it has plenty of time to cool and thicken while we bake the cake layers. So you want to place a medium saucepan over medium heat and add 340 grams or 1.5 cups of heavy cream, and then heat it until you see little bubbles beginning to form around the edges of the pan. You don't want it to kind of come to a boil or simmer. Now reduce the heat down to low and whisk in 2 tablespoons of sifted unsweetened cocoa powder until it's completely smooth. Now next add in 600 grams or 3 3/4 cups of semi-sweet chocolate. I like using 50% dark chocolate, along with 340 grams or 1.5 cups of room temperature unsalted butter, 3/4 of a teaspoon of instant coffee powder, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, and 255 grams or 1.5 cups of sifted powdered sugar. And then you just want to gently stir everything together until the chocolate and butter have completely melted and the frosting is silky smooth. You don't want it to simmer or boil at all, otherwise it can split, so just keep it on a really low heat, and as soon as everything is melted and smooth, then take it off. Now once it's ready, you want to pour the frosting through a fine mesh sieve into a heat-proof bowl just to get rid of any, remaining lumps. Now cover the surface with plastic wrap, make sure it's touching the frosting to prevent a skin from forming, and then just leave it to cool completely at room temperature while we make the cake layers. It'll thicken slightly into this kind of perfect spreadable yet slightly runny consistency for this recipe. Now it's time to make the yellow cake layers. So you want to preheat your oven to 350F or 180C conventional and grease the sides of 2 8-inch cake pans. I like using my homemade cake release, and then you want to line the bottoms with parchment paper. If you do have more of the same size cake pans, you can prepare them too so that you can bake more cake layers at the same time, and it'll just make the process a bit quicker. Next, in a medium bowl, sift together 390 grams or 3 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 45 grams or 6 tablespoons of cornstarch, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then just whisk everything together until it's well combined and set it aside for now. Next, in a large bowl, add 170 grams or 3/4 of a cup of room temperature unsalted butter, 140 grams or 2/3 of a cup of unflavored vegetable oil, I use canola oil, and 400 grams or 2 cups of white granulated sugar. And then using a hand or stand mixer on medium speed, cream everything together for about 2 minutes until it's light and creamy. Next, add in 3 large room temperature eggs one at a time, mixing well in between each addition. Next, you want to add in a further 4 large room temperature egg yolks and mix until fully combined. Next, you want to pour in 1 1/4 teaspoons of white vinegar, 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla, and 395 grams or 1 3/4 cups of room temperature buttermilk, and then just mix everything together until it's nice and smooth. The batter may look slightly curdled, but that's totally fine for now. Now once that's done, you just want to set your mixer aside because we're going to finish the batter by hand. Now to finish off, you want to add the pre-sifted dry ingredients into the wet ingredients, and then gently fold everything together using a spatula until it's just combined and you can no longer see any streaks of unmixed flour. You want to be careful not to overmix, otherwise this can give you like a dense and tough cake. Now the next part is one of the most important parts of a Smith Island cake and what makes it so unique, and that is the many thin cake layers. So you want to measure 1 cup of batter, approximately 1 cup, into each prepared cake pan and spread it into an even layer, and then gently tap the pans on the counter once to remove any large air bubbles, and then bake for about 12 to 13 minutes or until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean or with a few moist crumbs. Now you want to let the cakes cool in the pans for a few minutes before running a thin knife along the edges to release the cakes, and then carefully turn them out onto a wire rack to cool. Now, using the exact same pans, you want to re-grease the sides and reline the bottoms using the same pieces of parchment, so there's no need to use new ones and no need to kind of wash the pans or anything like that. And then just repeat the process with another cup of batter in each pan and continue baking the layers in batches until you've used up all of the batter. You should end up with 9 layers of cake, but it's okay if you end up with kind of 8 or 10. Now, just a quick tip, when it comes to storing the baked layers, when my next cake layers are almost done baking, I like to transfer the cooled cakes from the wire rack onto a lined baking sheet, cover with parchment, and then place the newly baked cakes onto the wire rack to cool. And then just repeat this process until you have all of your cake layers. It just makes it a little easier to store the layers stacked like that if you don't have much bench space, or if you only have one wire rack. Now, once all of the cake layers have cooled completely and the frosting has thickened, it's time to assemble the cake. The frosting should have this kind of thick, slightly runny texture like this. It just makes it so much easier to spread onto thin layers of cake. So you want to place your first cake layer onto a serving plate or cake stand and spread over a thin, even layer of the chocolate fudge frosting, taking it just to the edges. Using an offset spatula is going to help ensure that you have a nice even layer, which is super important, otherwise the cake may start to tilt as you stack on more layers. Now you want to top with another cake layer and just repeat the process until all of the layers have been stacked. Now, once all the layers are stacked, you want to use the remaining frosting to cover the top and sides of the cake, smoothing it out with an offset spatula or cake scraper if you'd like. One of the signature features of a Smith Island cake is that the entire cake is completely covered in chocolate frosting, which helps to seal in all that moisture. I had a little leftover frosting, so I did decide to do some piping on the top of the cake, but this is totally optional. Now, once the cake is ready, you want to let it sit for about 15 minutes in the fridge or 30 to 60 minutes at room temperature before slicing and serving to give the frosting a little time to set, which will make it easier to slice the cake. It also just allows a little bit of time for the flavors of the frosting and cake layers to kind of meld together beautifully. And then once ready, slice and enjoy. This Smith Island cake has the most incredibly soft, buttery cake layers with that rich chocolate fudge frosting between every single layer, making every bite perfectly balanced and just absolutely delicious. And the best part is it isn't overly sweet. So that is it for today, guys. If you do decide to give this recipe a go, then please do leave a review on our blog. It really helps our content out here at Cakes by MK, and I'll see you in the next video.